Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our sixth episode of the live interview series, SSI Live Cosmic Conversations. My name is Nia, and as one of the science communication interns here at Cal Academy, I will be your host for today. In this series, we will interview a different member of our SSI intern cohort every episode. SSI stands for Summer Systematic Institute, a research experience for undergrads funded by the NSF. All of the interns Sophia and I will be interviewing work directly with curators or researchers on research projects on all sorts of topics, from plants to people to herps. Feel free to leave any questions in the chat, and we will get to them at the end of the episode. Today, I will be talking to Curtis. Can you please introduce yourself before we begin?
Yes. Hello, I am Curtis Lawrence III. I'm a rising fourth year biology student at Florida A&M University in Tallahassee, Florida. And I am here at the California Academy of Sciences working in the herpetology department.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Curtis. Let's get right into the questions. So, our first question is, what is herpetology and what made you fall in love with it?
So herpetology is the study of reptiles and amphibians. So any reptile and any amphibian is kind of under the umbrella of herpetology. Um, Funnily, I wasn't really interested in herpetology. I actually didn't know it existed until last year when I was at another summer program at the University of Texas where I was studying anole lizards. And that's where I found out about herpetology. And since then, I've kind of um, really gotten into just learning about, in herpetology, we call them herps for short. So just learning about herps in general. And now here I am studying frogs, which I also knew nothing about before I started.
Very interesting. So, in your last internship, you said that was your first time working like with herps. Would you say you want to continue working with it like into your career or maybe look at something else?
I'm not exactly sure. I think I just like a lot of animals in general. Um, I do like really like reptiles and like my history is kind of in reptiles, but I kind of just like all animals in general. But I would definitely see myself at least doing some herpetology in my future.
Awesome. So, can you introduce the research project you're working on here at Cal Academy?
Yeah, so I am working under Dr. Raina Bell, the curator of the herpetology department, and Dr. Michael Yuan on a species of frog in the Caribbean called Eleutherodactylus johnsoni, which is also known as the Montserrat whistling frog. And we're looking at their genetics on Antigua and Barbuda to see if they are native or invasive to that island, and then also seeing if there are Cuban tree frogs, which would be invasive, if those are also on the island as well.
So, if you find that they are invasive, what like next steps do you think this project would go in?
So if they are invasive to the island, um, it would kind of let us know like more about their distribution because they're very widely distributed in the Caribbean, and because of like how distributed, we're really trying to figure out, which islands are these populations native to, where are they invasive to, and if we can figure that out, then we can understand like the dynamics of, what makes a species really easy to colonize a new place, um, what genetic or morphological aspects make it easy for a species to become invasive in a certain area, and why do some species become invasive? Why do other species not become invasive? And then also using that to inform conservation efforts on Antigua and Barbuda to see, you know, should we actually conserve this if it is actually invasive? Um, can we do anything to respond to it if it is invasive?
That's very interesting. Um, it made me think about how you're working in the Caribbean islands. Your work is for amphibians in the Caribbean islands. Is there any way to like involve people from the Caribbean in this kind of work that you know of?
Yeah, so actually, I know that one of the graduate students, actually two graduate students, one of them in Dr. Lauren Esposito's lab, Luigi, he actually helped collect some of the um, specimens for this project, and he's originally from Puerto Rico. Um, and then also, I know that they partner with local um, organizations wherever they go, because I think this is under the Islands 2030 initiative. So
Mm-hmm.
they're working with local people in the Caribbean and then on Antigua and Barbuda, specifically partnering with conservation organizations that are on the island, especially once this research is done and published, so they can act on that.
You mentioned Luigi. Who was the other intern or the other person?
Luigi, he is a graduate student, master's student in Dr. Lauren Esposito's lab in the arachnology lab. So they study spiders and scorpions.
And he's
Um,
working with herps. He helps with herps.
he, I think they're all like together, just like the herpetology people and the entomology people both kind of all go to the islands to collect things or do their research there. And so because they're both like just there, they kind of help with each other's stuff and just help collect each other's things.
That's really cool. Okay, so our next question is, what's the most surprising fact you've learned about your study subject?
Um, I think one of the most surprising things that I've learned is just how like diverse herps, even though herps aren't like really a real group, just like how diverse they are. Like, I didn't know anything about frogs before this besides just like basic things, but like I didn't know that there were frogs that, don't make ribbits and croaks, like they like make high pitched whistling sounds, or like all the different that there are like a whole bunch of different species of frogs. The frogs that I'm studying are like really tiny. I didn't know there were frogs that were that small before. I thought all frogs were like, generally like average sized frogs, but these are like really tiny. Um, and then just across herpetology in general, just like how diverse the group is. There's just so many different species.
That's really interesting. One interesting thing I learned about herpetology recently is that crocodiles are not considered herps, even though they're reptiles. Are they reptiles? I don't know.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, so that's really cool that you're learning like as you go. A lot of people come in and like already know about what they're studying, but I'm also in the same boat, just learning as I go. Okay, so our next question is, what is your favorite memory in nature?
Um, my favorite memory in nature. I feel like I have a lot of memories in nature. Like as a kid, I used to go out into like the woods of Pennsylvania and just climb trees sometimes. But um, I would say one that at least comes to mind is from Field Week when we were all earlier in the program when you were out at Point Reyes. Um, and we were just like out at night collecting spiders and then also ended up catching frogs and seeing a bunch of other things. Um, I just think it was really cool because that was something like I'd never really done before. I never thought about going out and collecting spiders to test for mercury contamination, but it was just really cool to go out and collect things for a research project and do like actual field work. And then also, we were all just like around, like talking and catching random things and finding random things. So it was just really fun.
Wow, was that your first ever experience like doing any field work?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's really cool. That was a fun adventure for everyone, I think. Okay, our last core question for today is, if you had unlimited resources, what project would you use it on?
I think my like because I'm really interested in paleontology, so looking at like the history of life, I think that if I had unlimited resources, I would like to work on understanding all like the different transitions in the history of life, like understanding like why certain things have like certain characteristics that they have, like, you know, like for example, we understand a lot about, you know, how birds came about and, you know, evolution of flight and things like that. But like for example, in bats, you know, you kind of have this one point where there's things that are very closely related to bats and can't fly, and then we have bats and they can fly. So like understanding like what happened in the middle of that, you know, what would it look like for like super early bats or something, or like looking at other things, like with primates or other reptiles, just like, or like even with like for example snakes and rattlesnakes, like what did a early rattlesnake before like they had super developed rattles, like what did that look like? So just understanding, you know, how did that those processes happen. um, I think that's the kind of project I would like to do.
Wow. So when you say like transitions, do you mean like the evolution of like new characteristics?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. So that wraps up our core questions. Before we move on to our bonus round, do we have any questions in the chat?
Yes, we have a lot of messages in the chat. We'll start at the top. Julia asks, what is your favorite dinosaur?
I would say, well, I guess I have a couple. One, I like Spinosaurus, mostly because it's just weird and interesting. Like in past years, there's been a whole lot of studies into what it is because nobody can really understand like what it is or what it's doing or what it's eating. But it's also interesting because it's like a member of a group, and they were like the only group of dinosaurs that actually specialized into eating fish, aside from like birds and stuff. So that was just like it's really interesting. But then also, you know, going into birds, I also like the shoebill stork because it's just very weird, and they have like a very interesting behavior of like, you know, bowing and like um, respecting like other individuals. So it's just they're really interesting.
Our next question in the chat is, what process is needed to figure out if they're invasive? Is it DNA?
Yes. So my specific project is looking at their DNA. And so I've been mostly in the lab for the past couple of weeks, extracting DNA from frog specimens. But the idea is that if a species is invasive, then it would have colonized an area like relatively recently. So it wouldn't have had much time to like become like a really stable population or spread a whole lot. And so genetically, they wouldn't be very diverse as opposed to like a population that's native and has been there for like thousands, millions of years. They would be more genetically diverse. So you can look at their genetics and see if they're invasive or native based on how diverse a population is genetically.
Next question is, what are your long-term goals in this field?
That is something that I'm still, you know, figuring out, because recently, like I've discovered a whole lot of different things that I can do in this field. Like I just discovered herpetology last year, but I do ultimately want to get some level of graduate education, hopefully a PhD, so I can go into research, and I also want to go into like teaching and like sharing science with other people and like the public.
Next question is, do you plan on keeping a relationship with Cal Academy after this internship?
Yeah, definitely. I think one great thing about like this field is it's kind of small, and so it's really easy to like keep connections with everybody, and you know everybody knows everybody. So you know, eventually at the end of the program, when I leave, I want to stay in contact with my mentors, stay in contact with my PIs, and also the rest of SSI. You know, for as long as we can, forever.
Oh.
Jaquez asks, would you prefer fieldwork, lab work, or a balance of the two?
I'm not quite sure because I've only had one experience doing field work, and that was 3 weeks ago. So I don't really know what it's like to do field work. I hope to get more experience in that, and then especially like later on, just doing different types of field work to see what that's like. Um, I do enjoy doing like lab work too, so hopefully I can do a combination, but also like I don't know what that looks like, so hopefully in the future I'll get that experience.
And then Jaquez also asks, are there any super niche frog facts that you know?
Um, well, I'm not, because I really like, this is my first time really doing anything with frogs, but let's see, I can't think of anything besides like just the fact that there are super tiny frogs and frogs that make super complex sounds besides like croaking and ribbiting. Um, yeah.
All right, final 3 questions. Panther Fans 88 asks, if you were able to be a director of a museum, what would it be about?
If I was able to be a director of a museum, I would probably be doing something either with like, because I know here like the departments are split into like all the different groups of organisms, and then also the geology department. So I would either probably be in geology because I do like paleontology and fossils, or I would be in like an extant group kind of department. So like herpetology, studying living reptiles, or in mammalogy or ornithology. Um, I don't see myself in like a specific place because I kind of like all of those things. So I guess I'll just have to see where that goes.
Chantel asks, is anyone else in your family into science?
Yes, I have a younger brother who is also into science. He's actually at the same school. He's studying physics. He's interested in going into astrophysics, which is very different from biology and herpetology. But yeah.
And last but not least, Janaya asks, what natural environment do you think would be the most interesting to explore in terms of the type of species you'd be working with?
Um, I think rainforests most likely. Rainforests in general are just like really diverse. Like most of the species that we find on Earth are in rainforests. So it'd just be really interesting to see that. And then also like rainforests are very undiscovered, understudied because they're hard to get to and you know, hard to go through. Um, so I'd like to look into rainforests because they're just really cool.
Okay, great questions, chat. So we'll move on to our bonus round, our comment questions. So our first comment question is, if you had to be an animal or plant for the day, oh, wrong slide. Uh-oh. We'll do that one first. What is your favorite scientific name of a species and why?
Okay. So recently at my time at SSI, when we went into the herpetology collections, we found a species of snake that has a name that's similar to mine. It is, I think, a sea snake, right? Um, it's called Lepimus curtus. And actually, the name has been renamed to Hydrophis curtus, but it was just really cool. Like, there's a random species of snake that has a scientific name that's similar to mine. And then also very random, but there is a dinosaur named Thanos. So that's also really cool because some people liked Marvel and wanted to name a dinosaur Thanos, so they did.
It's so interesting how people can name things like whatever they want, really, when they find stuff. But on the next slide, we actually have some pictures of Lapinis curtis, if anyone is interested to see what that looks like. I don't know, I see a little bit of resemblance. Okay, our next question. If you could bring back any extinct species, which one would it be?
I would say, at least like at the top of my list is like the Tasmanian tiger. It's from Australia, and it's like I thought about it because it's it's a relatively recent like extinct species. I think like 1930 something is when it went extinct, but it was like it's just really weird because it's like it looks like a dog and it's not a dog. It's actually like not even closely related to dogs, and it's also like one of the apex predators. It used to be an apex predator in Australia, um, but then like a whole bunch of invasive species came in and kind of like destroyed the whole Australian ecosystem, and then Tasmanian tiger eventually went extinct. Um, and I think there's like efforts to try to bring it back, um, but I would like to see it come back so it could like kind of be in a way like restoring Australia's ecosystem in a way.
Wow. How would they bring it back?
I don't know. I know there's like things about like, bringing back mammoths and bringing back Tasmanian tigers, but like I guess using genetics, I don't know if there's any Tasmanian tiger DNA that's been preserved, but just like using that, yeah, I don't actually know how that stuff works, but
That'd be
it's
really
somewhere.
cool to see, though.
Yeah.
Tasmanian tiger. Okay. Our last question is, if you could go to Herpetology Planet, what's the first thing you would do there?
I guess I would just see what's there. Like I want to go see a bunch of like crocodiles and chameleons and stuff because they're really weird. Just like watch them, I guess, see what they do, pretty much.
Okay, thank you, Curtis. So that wraps up today's episode of Cosmic Conversations. Thank you, Curtis, for joining us. Before we end today, we would like to encourage you to follow us on social media platforms at CalAcademy_SSI to learn more about science and natural history museums along with us this summer. Tune in tomorrow where we will be interviewing Jordan on her research on nudibranchs. Thank you so much for watching.